Why do rural folks live such a hardened life, and how does that reflect into the politics that we see today? Well, to understand that, you'll have to understand the role that religion plays in rural communities. And to understand the role religion plays in rural communities, we'll have to understand religion. So let's take it back to 1054. In the year of 1054, that is known as the Great Schism. And what happened there was we seen a split in the Christian church as it was known at the time. In this time, we are looking at the Roman Empire and the fight between Rome and the Pope and religious authorities and officials in Constantinople, which is present-day Turkey. Leading up to 1054, there were major struggles between the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Byzantine Empire, primarily around papal authority, which is the Pope having authority in both religion and politics and civic life, as well as conciliar authority in the Byzantine Empire. And additionally, this is a pretty large area that was being covered and ruled over. And there were major differences happening between Roman language and Greek language and the cultures that evolved around both of them. Another major difference between the two was the Filioque clause in the Nicene Creed. This clause had to do with how the Holy Spirit was represented from the Father and Jesus Christ, the Son. Once these two churches officially split, the Roman Christianity evolved into what we know today as Roman Catholicism, and between 1054 and the 1500s, it continued to grow and spread throughout Europe and, of course, lands us in England. And around that time, Martin Luther, not the king, was a monk who in Germany wrote his 95 Thesis that challenged the way that the church was currently thinking and the way that the church currently held its authority in and amongst its folks. In 1517, the Protestant Reformation was brought to life and really kick-started and spread fast by the invention of the printing press. So for the first time, Bibles were able to be printed and spread amongst folks, and additionally, they were starting to be printed in the everyday vernacular of the people who were reading them. So before then, we had Bibles that were written only in Latin, and you had to understand and know how to read Latin and able to be able to read and understand the Bible, whereas now they were writing the Bible in English and German and the other vernaculars that they were of the folks they were trying to reach. Now here we see the rise of Lutheranism, Calvinism, and the Anglican Church under King Henry VIII in England. Now the major difference between the Catholics and the Protestants is that Catholics believed that salvation and authority came from different places. They believed that authority came from both the Bible and church tradition, so they put more of an emphasis on things like baptism and maintaining other traditions within the church, whereas Protestants believed that the authority came from the Bible strictly and alone. They also believed in the ability of people to read the Bible and interpret it for themselves, as opposed to just taking in the understandings from the Pope, priests, or other authorized members of the church. Differences in beliefs around salvation revolved around faith and good works. Catholics believed that faith alongside of moral and obedient living would earn you salvation and favor in God, whereas Protestants believed that faith alone is what earned you salvation. To Protestants, they believed that good works were a result of faith and not a cause for salvation. Additionally, Catholics look to the Pope as the head of the church, and Protestants did not. And this is where the split really happened in England in the 1500s, because King Henry wanted to have a divorce, and the Pope denied him that divorce. So what did King Henry do? Instead of taking this on the head and moving on, he changed the Church of England to an Anglican church that was more aligned with Protestant views. Throughout the next century, tensions would build between Catholics and Protestants, which would lead us into the early 1600s, where two groups of Puritans would form. There were Puritans who wanted to create a church outside of the Catholic Church, and another group of Puritans who wanted to continue trying to reform the church inside of the Catholic religion. These two groups of people would go on to move to the Americas, to the New World, what we know presently as the United States, and what is commonly referred to as the pilgrimage and the voyage to America on the Mayflower. Now, the second group of Puritans that came over were much larger. The first group had a couple hundred folks that came along, whereas the second group had 2,000 folks that had come over initially and ended up with 20,000 other Puritans that followed along. Puritans, because they believed in individuals being able to access and read the Bible, they believed in more personal responsibility in one's own faith, and also believed in taking church home with you. So outside of going to church on Sunday, they believed in daily readings and prayer and I don't want to say meditations, along with going to church at different times to uphold religious values. Now, the Puritans were coming to the Americas in pursuit of their own religious freedom and their own freedom to speak freely, because while they were in England, as the current monarchy was attempting to quell tensions and to realign faiths among Englanders, they were being challenged on their ideas around Christianity. So in present day United States, when we talk about the separation of church and state and our ability to use free speech, it is not exactly how it was intended whenever this country was first being colonized. Even back in the early 1600s, whenever folks who were free thinkers or had ideas about religion and Christianity that fell outside of what the Puritans believed, they were quickly driven out or exiled from their communities. Now, establishing authority in the New World was a problem for these Puritan ministers because there were not enough of them to preach to the massive population that was beginning to grow. They had issues with folks not coming to church or not taking church very seriously, so that is whenever they started really pushing for folks to bring the Bible home. They created other texts and things for folks to be able to participate in daily prayer or daily other religious activities outside of the formal church walls. To keep folks in line, they pushed against things they felt were immoral, such as dancing or drinking too much or wearing clothes that were too fashionable. Hard work was next to godliness, and they believed that the more you struggled here on earth, the closer to salvation you would become, because good works are a sign of good faith. Because of their massive population, Puritans also quickly gained political control over the colonies here in the United States, and they understood how important it was to maintain control over the population that would continue to grow because of their experiences with England. This all really sets the foundation for exploration across the western portions of the United States, and it will also explain why certain folks were chosen to explore out west to maintain that strict religious control. And it also starts to build an understanding of why rural communities operate in the way that they do today.